At first glance, Pennsylvania looks ordinary. Rolling hills, small towns, aging cities. It seems familiar until you realize every stream here faces a different ocean, and ancient decisions beneath its hills controlled how America grew. Borders, rivers, and valleys split the state in three directions, shaping trade, settlement, and industry in ways most states never could. But how did a place so familiar become the quiet centerpiece of a continent? The answer is hidden, in lines few ever notice, and those lines change everything that follows. Pennsylvania sits at the crossroads of the continent, bordered by 6 states and shaped by boundaries that rarely follow straight lines. Its nickname, the Keystone State, comes from more than just history. It reflects a physical reality. The state holds together the eastern seaboard and the interior, the north and the south, in ways that maps rarely reveal at first glance. Within its borders, a hidden system is always at work. Every drop of rain that falls here faces a decision. Some water finds its way east, gathering in the headwaters of the Delaware River, flowing past forests and towns before reaching the Atlantic Ocean. Other streams turn south, joining the Susquehanna, winding through valleys and farmland until they empty into the Chesapeake Bay. Still others travel west, crossing the Allegheny Front, feeding the Ohio River and eventually the Mississippi, bound for the Gulf of Mexico. In the far north, a smaller share of water slips quietly toward Lake Erie and the Great Lakes, destined for the St. Lawrence and the North Atlantic. These divides do not announce themselves. They follow ridges and plateaus, sometimes just a subtle rise in a farmer's field or a line of trees on a distant hill. Yet these invisible seams have shaped the fate of towns and entire regions. Pennsylvania's triple drainage system, east to the Atlantic, west to the Mississippi, north to the Great Lakes, means that a single ridge can send water, and with it people, goods, and ideas, in completely different directions. The rivers and valleys carved by ancient forces became the natural corridors for trade and migration, long before highways or railroads were built. Those low passes and river routes guided indigenous trails, then canals, then rail lines and roads. Over and over, human movement followed the choices that water had already made. The state's rectangular outline is deceiving. Within its 46,000 square miles, the land is crisscrossed by boundaries that matter more than any drawn by surveyors. The Allegheny Front, the Pocono Ridges, the Plateau Edges, each one divides watersheds and, in doing so, divides destinies. Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, Erie and Scranton, Harrisburg and Allentown all grew up on different sides of these divides, looking outward in different directions. It is Pennsylvania's central placement and its web of hidden water routes that has made it the quiet connector of the American story. What looks like an ordinary patch of hills and valleys is, in truth, the operating system of a continent. Long before steel rails or asphalt highways, the valleys and low passes of Pennsylvania shaped the first human movement across this land. Indigenous nations knew these corridors intimately, weaving a network of trails that threaded through river valleys, skirted the steepest ridges, and found the rare breaks in the endless chains of hills. Paths like the Great Shamokin and the Warrior's Path followed the natural contours, linking the Delaware and Susquehanna basins, the Ohio country, and the Great Lakes. These were not random tracks. They were deliberate choices, dictated by the land itself. The Appalachian Mountains dominate Pennsylvania not through height, but through repetition. Ridge after ridge runs northeast to southwest, each one a barrier less than 1,000 feet high, but together forming a formidable blockade. The Allegheny Front stands as the most imposing, a sharp escarpment rising more than 1,500 feet above the valleys below. For anyone moving east to west, these ridgelines were not just obstacles. They were decision points. Only a handful of gaps offered passage, funneling travel into narrow corridors. European settlers quickly learned to follow these established routes. Canals and later railroads traced the same valleys, hugging the rivers that had already carved the easiest paths through the mountains. The Pennsylvania Main Line Canal, for example, wound along the Juniata and Susquehanna valleys, while the Allegheny Portage Railroad was forced to climb steep inclines to connect east to west. Every major transportation project faced the same challenge: how to cross the ridges without losing time, money, or cargo. Even today, the legacy of these ancient choices is visible. Major highways and rail lines still follow the old corridors, bending to the will of the terrain. The scarcity of low routes through the Appalachians has always given Pennsylvania a strategic value out of proportion to its size. Control the passes, and you control the flow of people, goods, and ideas. The land itself dictates where movement is possible, turning ordinary valleys into arteries of commerce and culture. In Pennsylvania, geography is destiny, and the ridges and corridors remain as decisive now as they were for the first travelers who crossed them. The Susquehanna River cuts straight through Pennsylvania's mountains, following a path set long before the first ridge rose. Geologists call it an antecedent river. Its course was fixed over 100 million years ago, as the Atlantic Ocean opened and the land slowly heaved upward. As the Appalachians emerged, the Susquehanna refused to bend, slicing gorges through rock that once lay flat. Water gaps like the one at Blue Mountain near Harrisburg stand as evidence, a river older than the mountains themselves, carving a corridor that would become a lifeline for those who followed. In the ground beneath these valleys, ancient swamps from the Carboniferous period left behind seams of coal. Over 300 million years ago, dense forests and tangled wetlands buried their carbon, forming vast beds of anthracite and bituminous coal. These resources, locked in by the same geology that shaped the rivers, would one day power the world. Pittsburgh rose at the meeting point of the Allegheny, Monongahela, and Ohio rivers, a three-river nexus that made the city a furnace for industry. Coal arrived by barge and rail, steel mills lined the banks, and the city's output became the backbone of American growth. The rivers carried more than raw materials. They moved fortunes, workers, and ideas, all funneled by the ancient cuts in the land. Not all stories ended in triumph. Centralia, perched above a rich anthracite seam, became a warning. A mine fire ignited in 1962, spreading underground through the coal beds. The fire still burns today, forcing nearly every resident to leave, a reminder of how deeply the land's history can shape and haunt the present. 15,000 years ago, northern Pennsylvania lay beneath a sheet of ice. The Ice Age glaciers advanced and retreated, scraping the land and leaving scars that still shape the state today. At places like Hickory Run, the ground is littered with boulder fields, rocks left by melting ice, stripped of soil and exposed for centuries. Those fields are silent and barren, reminders of a time when little could grow. The ice did more than scatter stones. It carved broad valleys and deposited thick layers of glacial till, transforming the soil. The retreating glaciers left rich, fertile ground that became the backbone of northern Pennsylvania farms and forests. The same valleys that once channeled meltwater now serve as the main arteries of the modern economy. Interstate 78 and Interstate 81 cut through these ancient corridors, following paths first cleared by ice and then by rivers. Today, these highways carry millions of tons of freight every year, trucks and trains moving between the Northeast, the Midwest, and the South. Warehouse clusters have sprung up along these routes, especially in the Lehigh and Susquehanna valleys, where flat land and easy access make them ideal for logistics giants. More than 500 distribution centers now line the Interstate 78 and Interstate 81 corridors, handling goods from coast to coast. The legacy of the Ice Age is not just visible in the landscape, it is felt in the steady flow of commerce that moves through Pennsylvania day and night. Geography's grip on movement has never loosened, even in the digital age. Even now, every train, every truck, and every river barge crossing Pennsylvania traces routes set by ancient divides and geologic chance. As America's supply lines and energy needs evolve, this quiet, geographic crossroad still determines what moves and what stalls. Sometimes, the center holds more power than anyone suspects.